This morning I went digging through my bin of many things and decided it's time to work on this Athearn Pennsylvania Railroad F7. And this isn't the type of Athearn you're thinking of. I believe this is a much older style of Athearn locomotive. First order of business, we need to test this thing out, so I'll give it some power. And it sounds like it's seized. I'll try going the other way. It moves, but it does not sound very good. So I'm going to guess there's either a bunch of dried lubricant or something else gunking this thing up. So I'm pretty sure it'll just need a good clean out, and then it should hopefully be good to go. Before we go too far into this, just a little bit of a backstory on this model. I got this thing in a whole bunch of other engines a while back, and I'm just now getting to this thing. It was an unboxing from eBay, which I did on the channel, and I believe I tested this thing out in that video. I don't know if it runs exactly the same or not, because it was a while ago, but as we can see, this thing needs some work. So I'm going to start by getting this thing open, but I'm going to do this a little differently. Most of these Athearn units, including this one, you just need to unclip the shell. But for some reason, there's a Katy on the front of this model and nothing on the back. So I'm not going to put a new Katy on the front. I'm just going to swap this coupler box from the front to the rear because I'm going to be a little bit lazy here. I don't want to use up another Katy that I don't really have to on an old engine. And I think it's going to be way more useful having a Katy on the back of the model than on the front. So I'll get the engine cradle over here and we will get to work unscrewing that, putting it on the other end of the model, then taking the shell off. Alright, I just had to cut that and do that off camera. That was way more work than I was expecting, and I still might have to do a little tinkering to this. The old coupler box was actually too big to fit back here, which might be why it was on the front. So I used one of these weird older style coupler boxes that I still have laying around, and just kind of threw the Katy on there, and that seems to work pretty well. It springs decently back and forth, which is really all I care about. I might need to file down the end of this just a little bit so it's not interfering with this truck, but other than that, I think the Katy install is mostly done. So now we can take the shell off, hopefully, and we can take a look at the internals of this model. So immediately, it does look really interesting in here. It looks like everything's held together by screws, including the motor, the commutator, and all the trucks. So that's nice and easy. There shouldn't be any clips or anything in here. And it looks like really the only plastic pieces are these drive lines here. So I don't know what's actually gumming this model up, so we'll probably have to start tearing into these trucks, and then we can go from there. So I'm going to start with the front truck. So we've got the truck off the model. I think next up I need to start disassembling the worm gear case cover, whatever this thing is. I'm not a huge fan of how the wires are just kind of screwed in here, but it seems like that works, so I'm going to leave it alone unless the wires break. That's interesting. That's not even a worm gear or anything. So I think now I'm going to start tearing into the truck. Alright, so it appears that I have gotten everything apart, and this is a really interesting design. Something that I do actually kind of like, and it might actually make this thing a little bit easier to work on, is how the wheels stay intact with the side frame, although they are out and free rolling and disconnected from here. So this way I don't really have to worry about polarity or anything. I just need to make sure the other truck is the exact same way, so we don't get any short circuits or anything. At least I think so. They might have to be different. Worst case scenario, we can flip it around, but we will see. I did take a moment to double check, and it does in fact look like they have to be on opposite sides, which is good to know. So now we can start tearing into this thing, well, I already have, and start cleaning it up. Now it's time to try and put this thing back together. I'm not entirely sure how well this is going to go. I had to take the wheels out of their side frames just so I could try and maneuver them into here. So we'll see how this turns out. I think this thing with some fresh oil and everything should be pretty good to go, but I'll see if I can actually get it put back together first. So that took a little bit of experimenting, but I figured out how this thing is supposed to go back together. First of all, I need to line up the wheels and get them slotted into here. Alright, the more nightmarish part of this is done. That took a lot more effort than I was expecting. So now it's really just this one piece left, which I need to make sure I'm angling in the correct direction. Believe it's supposed to go on just something like that. So, you may notice this locomotive looks quite a bit different now, specifically the fact that the front truck is attached. Well, several things happened at the same time. First of all, I forgot to press record when I was putting this on, but after that, I was just kind of messing around with the drive shaft a little bit, and I noticed that this thing felt really tight, like something was wrong in binding. So I tore back into this truck to try and figure out what was wrong. First of all, I tried giving it a little bit more oil. That didn't seem to help anything. Then I tried checking out this gear here because it seemed like that might have been what was binding, and I did actually find a little piece of flashing on it, which wasn't helping. I removed it with this knife, but that still wasn't the issue. So the thing I did notice is that this truck, the screws are really, really loose. I have not messed with this yet, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm essentially able to just kind of like turn this one with my hand. Same with this one right here, and it's kind of the case for the ones down here as well. So what I did was I tightened the screws on this truck like I normally would, torque down, nice, nothing too crazy, but apparently, the way this thing runs, it needs them to be loose. So that's a good lesson for when I work on this truck, but I never would have figured that out while I was filming, so I had to do some trial and error off camera, and I figured out that that's a weird oddity with these Athearn engines, apparently. I don't know if someone did something weird to this engine at some point, or if that's just how these are. If anyone has any experience with these things, please let me know, but that definitely seems odd, and I don't think parts should be loose like that. And I don't mean like really loose, but not fully tightened down, especially on a model, because I feel like you can lose screws that way, and I just don't like it. So with that new knowledge in mind, I'm going to start on the rear truck, hopefully with fewer issues this time. Again, before we go further, I do need to highlight, I have not touched this screw yet, and I just noticed I can probably turn this just by hand. It's so loose in here. I don't know why it's assembled like this, but that's really weird. Alright, so now we've got everything apart. This truck looks a little bit dirtier than the other one, so I'll give this one a good cleaning, just like I did to the other one. Now it's time to reassemble this truck, hopefully with less issues, and this time I'm going to just start balancing it on the same knife I used to get the flashing off the other gear, whatever you want to call it. That worked out pretty well last time, so hopefully it should do well for me again right here. As you can see, the chassis is now back together. I only had to take this rear truck apart 3 times, opposed to the, I believe, 5 or 6 times I took apart this front truck, but only because I was being dumb. The first time, I forgot to put in the bar for the truck cover. The next time, I put it in backwards, and the third time's the charm, as they say, I got it right. So now that we're done with the trucks, it's time to work on the motor, specifically the commutator, and then give the bearings a little bit of oil. I believe the commutator itself is just the brushes for the commutator are just held on by this one screw here. Unlike the trucks, this one's actually torqued down really well. Alright, I did not move it very far, but I think that should be enough to get access to what I need. To start, I'm actually going to use a new tool. I have found these brush picks the other day. I didn't know I had them laying around, but I think these should be perfect for trying to clean off the little gaps between the commutator. I once again just had to cut the camera. I could not get these brushes on with the tripod in my way, so it just got moved out of the way. I had to use a pair of pliers, and I had to just fight these brushes into place, so I'm glad I didn't have a tripod there. Now all I really have to do is oil the 2 bearings right next to the motor here. And now we can just kind of throw on the shell, and we should be good to test this thing out. Hopefully all my trial and error, screw loosening, everything that I've done to this thing works out. I don't even know if this thing will run. It ran terribly when we first started, but we'll see if I've made any progress here. So, it's now time for the moment of truth. Hopefully all this work will pay off. I really don't want to have to tear into this thing again, but we'll see. I'll give it some power. And that is way better. Given the issues I had with this thing, I thought it would be way worse than this, but that actually runs great. So I would definitely call it a success. While it's not perfect, it is a huge improvement over what it was, and especially considering all the trouble I went through, it's a much better result than I was expecting. I would say I don't know if I want to work on another one of these again, but I do have at least one more I have to work on. So hopefully I can get some more practice on these things, and maybe I'll get a lot better at working on these Athearn things. I don't know if this is just something weird I've got to get used to with these things, if there's something odd going on with this unit, or I just don't have enough experience with old engines, but please do let me know.